My name is Jeff Melamed, representing Caspy and Caspy, accounting firm in Jerusalem. Just came back from TNEC, where we had a 45-minute presentation, and they told us to do it in 12. So fasten your seatbelts. A lot harder to fall asleep during a 10-minute presentation, but you can try. Our topic is your taxes in Israel, and I'm basically going to cover four main areas. Any additional questions, you can come down to our booth downstairs. So I'm trying to do four things and then a little bit extra at the end if we have time. Number one, as an incentive to moving to Israel, all income from outside of Israel, the Israeli government is saying is going to be exempt from tax for 10 years. It's called a 10-year tax holiday, and it's all income from outside Israel. So if anybody wants to know, is my interest income exempt? The answer is yes. Real estate? Yes. Wages? Yes. All income from outside of Israel is going to be tax exempt for 10 years. Any income that I generate in Israel, if I'm working in Israel, generating it in Israel, if I'm sitting at my computer and I think I'm working in the United States, that's Israeli income, and that will be taxable. Income from outside is not taxable, it's not reportable in Israel. They don't want to know about it. Number two, U.S. citizens. As U.S. citizens, we are one of the few countries in the world that we're always taxed on our income. Wherever we live, our worldwide income is reportable and taxable to the United States. So that generally never goes away. Death and taxes, that's the way it is. That's as far as our federal taxes are concerned. As far as state taxes, California, where I assume most of the people here are from California, we are no longer subject to California taxes once we move outside of California, as a general rule, if I have no nexus in the state of California. So if I'm not working in California, I don't have real estate in California, I don't have own a partnership in California, then my income from California, I'm detached from California, I no longer have any nexus. If I leave some investments in a brokerage firm and in a bank that is not considered to be California source income, would not be taxable in California. So generally speaking, the year of transition, the year I make Aliyah, I might have a part-year resident tax return, but the year after that, generally I will file only federal taxes. The United States reserves the right to tax its citizens wherever they are in the world. In most cases, once we do move to Israel, in most cases we end up paying taxes, if we're paying taxes in Israel and not in the United States. As taxpayers, we're usually not too concerned about where we're paying our taxes. Some people ask, can I pay it in California? Can I pay it in Israel? You don't really have a choice. There are tax rules between the two countries. But generally, the general rule of thumb is once I move to Israel, I'll pay taxes in Israel, not in the United States, if I'm working and generating income in Israel. There are instances as well, after I'm moving to Israel, if I'm actually working, I have working income, earned income, that I will actually be filing a U.S. tax return and getting money from the United States via the additional child tax credit, possibly education credits. So oddly enough, we may still be filing taxes once we move to Israel, and not only not paying taxes, but actually having refunds, having rebates on our U.S. tax returns. The general rule of thumb, once I'm in Israel, after my 10-year tax holiday, I will be reporting income to both countries. There is a tax treaty. I'm not going to be paying taxes twice. That's point number three. Number two, there's no double taxation. The tax treaties between friendly countries say we can't tax them twice. People who are making a significant amount of money, you're going to be paying in the United States possibly close to 50% tax between my federal taxes, my state taxes. You move to Israel, you're going to be close to 50% tax there. So if you end up paying 50% to each country, doesn't leave you with much money. So luckily, that's not the situation. We don't have double taxation. The rule of thumb to know is I, as a taxpayer, will pay the higher tax in the two jurisdictions. So for example, if I have some income in the United States that's limited to 15% tax, and in Israel is 25% tax, I will pay 25% tax. If there's 15% tax in Israel and 25% in California, I'll pay 25%. The accountants have to work out who gets what we call the first bite, where the income is sourced, etc. But I will generally pay the higher of the two taxes, but not double. I'm not paying taxes in two countries. There are certain examples of income that is exempt either Israel or the United States, but again, we have to know it's not as good as it sounds sometimes. Yes, it's exempt in the United States, but might be taxable in Israel and vice versa. So you have to be aware of both rules in both states. Again, my first 10 years in Israel, I'm going to have exemptions. So I have something that is exempt in the United States, municipal bonds, whatever it is, then Israel is not going to tax it in the first 10 years based on the first rule that we said. Okay, the last point of my 4 points that I wanted to, might review some of them, but the last point is something called compliance. This is what we don't like to hear about. Heads up, compliance. There's certain things that we have to be aware of, may need to be aware of, depending on what our situation is. If somebody is self-employed, for example, self-employed individuals are urged to tax professionals. There are rules for self-employed individuals for U.S. tax reasons, and there are Israeli rules and regulations for Israeli persons. We have to register. We have to register at different tax offices. We have certain reporting requirements. It's very involved and not very familiar to us Westerners as far as what's involved in Israel. Therefore, like they say in Dodger Stadium, you have to get your program. To know the players, you have to know the rules. So it's not that you individuals have to know the rules, but you have to go to people who know the rules. You have to get professionals, get professional advice, and know what's out there. And it may be more significant to know if you are thinking of becoming self-employed, you have to know before you begin the game. It's a different set of rules in Israel. In the United States, typically you're self-employed. You go to your accountant after the year, plop the bag on his desk and say, this is what happened last year. In Israel, it doesn't work that way. You have to know in advance. So you really want to see people, professionals in advance if you are in that situation, meaning if I'm self-employed in the United States, I'm going to be self-employed in both countries. A lot of people are either commuting or working with the computer, but it is essential to know the rules, or at least know somebody who does know the rules. On the positive side, wage earners in Israel, if I go to Israel and I'm earning wages as an employee, there is no filing requirement. Right? It sounds odd to us as U.S. taxpayers. Everybody has to file a tax return. They either owe us or we owe them. In Israel, the general rule of thumb, if my only income is from wages, I will not be required to file a tax return. There are certain exceptions, certain reasons maybe I will want to file a tax return, but in general, wage earners do not file tax returns. Who does file tax returns? If I'm self-employed, if I'm a business owner, I have a corporation, if I have certain passive income, I may have to file a tax return. So on the upside, if I'm working in Israel as an employee, nothing to be concerned about, no reporting to be concerned about. I'll just mention here as a side point that one of the reasons I might want to file a tax return in Israel, if I'm working in Israel, if I have Israeli income, is charity is allowed in Israel not as an itemized deduction like it is here. It's allowed a credit. I have a 35% credit for charity, which is quite generous, especially people in lower tax brackets. For every $100 I give to a recognized charity, I'm getting $35 back, which is pretty nice to know. Americans, when we make Aliyah, we have no idea. Hopefully we're giving charity. But then, 10 years later, somebody tells you, what, you never knew that you get a 35% credit? So it's a nice thing to know that's out there to claim as a credit. There's something called the FBAR. I assume almost nobody in the room knows what an FBAR is, but you should. FBARs are not relevant for a lot of people because FBARs it's an acronym for Foreign Bank Account Report. That's not the real name, but that's what the IRS calls it as well. The FBAR is the Foreign Bank Account Report. If I have accounts outside of the United States, typically we're talking about Israel, if I have accounts in Israel whose aggregate balances exceeded $10,000 at any time during the year, even for one day, I have to file what's called an FBAR. And what? And nothing. It's not a tax return, it's a compliance return. I'm filing it not with the IRS, it's with the Treasury Department. So why is it important? I'm telling you about it because if you don't file, there are penalties for non-compliance. I'll just stress it's very important. These are high penalties. You don't want to know about the penalties so much, but you need to file that. You need to be aware of it. It's a very simple report. You don't need an accountant to file it, but it is something to be aware of. So therefore, there are people who have to file FBARs now. I have my Swiss account, my Israeli account. Some people do have money overseas, so they are aware of it, but certainly it normally does kick in once I move to Israel and I open accounts in that country. Okay, I'm going to do a quick review and maybe one or two more points. There's a 10-year tax holiday for what type of income? All my income. All income from outside of Israel will be exempt for 10 years, which is good news. That could mean my investments, my interest, dividends, capital gains, rental income. That could be my working income. Plenty of people commute. They're in Israel. They go back to the States. They're working. Doctors, the classic example. The income they're generating when I'm here, but it does not mean when I'm sitting at my computer in Israel generating income, which I think for a U.S. employer, for whoever it is, that is Israeli source income. As far as filing tax returns, we must continue filing tax returns outside of the United States once we move. Assume we have income, because they are income tax returns, so it's income generated. Self-employment, if I am self-employed or maybe starting to be self-employed, get good advice, get good professionals, and stay in compliance. Again, the FBAR, I just have to stress the FBAR, to file the FBAR, know about it, and do it. It's not that scary, but it is something that we need to make sure to be aware of. And compliance is the name of the game. More and more, there is a strong stress on international taxation, both by the United States and Israel and countries all over the world, they're really looking after international compliance and non-compliance. And eventually, hopefully, they try to get taxes as well. But a lot of them are not tax issues, just compliance. The takeaway I'd like you to take from the session is get good advice, be informed, stay in compliance, and stay out of trouble. Don't worry, be happy.